Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Spring practice is over. It is time to completely turn the page to some recruiting talk. Post-spring recruiting updates right here with Corey Bender from Gators Online on 3. Corey, man, I think recruiting, if Gator Nation goes on to Gators Online, I think they can see from your guys' updates, hey, man, recruiting is not slowing down whatsoever right now.
No, definitely not, Dave. Thanks for having me on as always. And Florida right now ranked inside the top 5 for the 2024 class. 7 kids make up the class. Obviously, you have DJ Lagway, who's the headliner, and a lot of big time kids, a lot of All-Americans in this class as well. And then you have the guy like Josiah Davis, the safety, who is on the rise, 45th ranked safety in the country, who I think is only going to move up the rankings more and more as people see him. So definitely, like you said, Florida's on the road recruiting. The kids are coming in every weekend for visits. So it's definitely an exciting time if you're a Gators recruiting fan.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And if you want some of the best coverage out there for recruiting, of course, Gators Online on 3. Corey and the guys there have it on lockdown right there with all these recruiting storylines that we'll get into on this episode of Gators Breakdown to get everybody kind of caught up post-spring right here. So everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thanks for joining us live here early in the morning if you are on kind of a moved around episode a bit. So definitely wanted to get Corey's thoughts here as far as recruiting goes. And then we want to continue the conversation. Gators Breakdown Plus, the Discord message board right there. You keep the conversation going with all these recruiting storylines as well. So, Corey, let's get started. Offensive side of the ball. Now, we're mostly going to focus heavily on offensive line, wide receiver, defensive line. There seems to be where most of the questions are coming in for this class right now. But, Corey, if we do go to running back quickly, Florida's got 2 already in the fold. And look, we kind of know Florida would be fine with just those 2, and more than likely to plan unless you get a Jarrett Gibson light back. So you're currently with him predicted to go elsewhere. Not really much traction, it sounds like, for other top backs out there. How likely do you see it? Florida taking 3 running backs? Because I think if you ask around, this staff is really, really high on Bowens. Thinks he's just as good as any back out there. So you got that storyline. If Florida's going to take 3 running backs or not.
Yeah, I think right now it's a little under 50%. Obviously, you have guys like you said, Jarrett Gibson, who are just a no-brainer regardless of how many guys you have in the class. He's just that good of a talent where you adjust on the fly and you take a kid like that. But I think right now it's a little under 50%. You have guys out there, like we mentioned, Gibson. There's a few other guys too in state that Florida would love to have in the class, like Micaiah Danzy up in Tallahassee. But I think obviously with him being in Tallahassee, I think he's leaning towards the Seminoles. There's some other guys, across the country that they're kind of evaluating as well. But I think right now you look at the class like Bowens, even when he committed, you watch his film, he's a bouncy kid who, weighs in a little bit more north than 200 pounds, really underrated, and really has a nice burst for his size too. And then obviously Daniel's up his way in Mississippi. I think, he's a strong runner. He's used to having the load on his shoulders too. He's used to being the guy in that offense. I know he kind of plays opposition a little bit too at, playing kind of quarterback and, kind of more like kind of a read option, wildcat type quarterback. Yeah. But when he is running the ball, he's very effective. And I think you have to be super pleased with that running back class regardless. And I just think right now it's not likely they take a 3rd running back, although they are in communication with some.
Right. That's how I see it playing out there too. So, all right, Corey, let's go to one of the big positions that Gator Nation's out there wondering about, and that is the wide receiver position. A good haul last cycle for the Gators. Now the coaching change kind of to deal with. Kerry Colbert out, Billy Gonzalez back in. Before we get into specifics, maybe with some players and maybe some targets, what's been the general feeling on the change from Colbert to Billy Gonzalez?
I think it's been very good and better than I thought it was going to be. And I say that just because, guys like Jeremiah Smith and a lot of these kids, even Chance Robinson before he committed to Miami, Colbert was one of the main reasons why Florida was kind of still on their radar, or Florida, why they were in their top group. Those relationships are very strong. So, once he departed for the NFL, it was kind of a wait and see just to see, who's going to be coming in. And, with Billy Gonzalez, some kids that are familiar with him, some kids that weren't. But the kids that did meet him and did come on campus since he's been hired, the reviews have been very, very positive. A lot of like you said, when you have the opportunity to sit with these kids for the first time, I mean, you name guys like Percy Harvin, a lot of the guys he's coached. Some of these youngsters probably just weren't aware of that, and that's a very big eye opener for them. So it's been a strong review since he's been in there, and then Jeremiah Smith. He's already visited since Billy Gonzalez has been on board. DJ Lagway was in town as well. So I think it's been as good as it gets. They're in the mix for several wide receivers right now with Jeremiah Smith, which I think is obviously unlikely, but he's still the biggest fish out there as far as a prospect, elite prospect that's still visiting Florida at the receiver position.
Yeah, so let's get a little bit deeper here at this position, Corey, and just how this position looks right now. Of course, you mentioned DJ Lagway in the fold, him reaching out to a lot of these receivers out there, and just wondering what this traction is out there for some of these wide receiver prospects. You just mentioned Jeremiah Smith, and of course, he's certainly the top target. But where do the Gators sit for targets like TJ Moore, Mario Craver, maybe even a Michael Turner right now? It seems Florida's in good shape for those guys, but there's Georgia commits out there. Nycar, Nitro Tuggle, Jazasa Trader is another target out there. But there's plenty more out there. But it seems like that group, that name has garnered the most interest from the fan base out there. So if you had to maybe even put on some prediction goggles a bit, when do you see the first wide receiver maybe popping for the Gators, and if one they can build off of a pretty good class last time as well?
I think here in the next month or two. I mean, Jeriah Hawkins at IMG, he has Florida and Penn State in his top two. West Virginia is in there as well. He hails from West Virginia, goes to IMG Academy, but I think Florida's in a really good spot for him. TJ Moore, obviously on Tampa Catholic, boasts one of the best, offer sheets, I think, across the country when it comes to receiver. I still think he's very underrated. Florida right now is his leader. Before he actually went public and said Florida was his leader, he said, Florida's in my top two with another school that really blew me away when I went on visits this spring. We still don't know what school that is yet because he wanted to keep that private, but I think the most important thing fans really want to know is where's Florida stand? And, they're sitting at the very top of him. So, and then you have Michael Turner, who's recently offered, another kid out of the Southeast, very speedy type kid. I think overall, Florida, like you said, it's a deep wide receiver board. And either way, I think Florida's going to sign a really good class. I think TJ Moore, he doesn't seem like the type that wants to drag his recruitment out too long. I think getting a guy like him and obviously in the fold would be huge with DJ Lagway. And you would think, I know I had a lot of fans reach out to me asking, are you surprised they haven't got one of these receivers in the fold yet? And I'm really not. I mean, it's just the amount of kids that have visited. It's just about getting them to campus. And, Mario Craver's another kid that's been mentioned. I was told in recent weeks that he's kind of more of a plan B for Florida right now. Florida really likes him. It's been mostly Florida and Auburn. Those have been the schools mentioned the most. But I know there are a few other guys a little bit higher on the board right now. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see if, Florida kind of gives him the green light if he does want to come to Gainesville. So either way, you got to be pretty optimistic if you're a Florida fan. A lot of options and a lot of kids who have the Gators, right at the very top of their list.
Yeah, Corey, I heard the same about Craver, and heard it's probably now a little more likely than it was at one point. But yeah, I'm kind of interested to see the timeline of some of these other guys and if that's going to affect the path there for one Mario Craver. So yeah, a lot of interesting storylines at that position for sure.
No, for sure. And that's what I think, too, right now with Florida. I mean, you're already ranked inside the top 5. I mean, it's a momentum game. And I think it was just like last year where before the summer, a lot of people were like, well, why haven't these guys jumped on board? I mean, June is now the key month for recruiting when it comes to, hey, am I ready to make a decision or am I going to drag this out into the fall? And you kind of saw how the dominoes fell last summer with a lot of kids deciding. So Florida already has one of the best recruiting classes. They're trending up for so many kids. And I think here in June, when, as like last year, they hosted so many official visitors, you'll start to see who's really serious about the Gators and who isn't. And I think overall, I think fans are going to be pretty pleased with how the summer plays out for Florida.
There we go. We'll continue on with the offense and another big position group with a lot of questions, and maybe the biggest one, offensive line, Corey, and to go along, the great reputation for developing offensive linemen from the staff. Osiris Torrance is about to be drafted high in the NFL. You got 2 coaches to help out in that area, but it seems like it's tough to get a stranglehold on some of the top-rated guys at the moment. And of course, I think we've got enough evidence right now that the staff also likes using the transfer portal for offensive linemen. And the big name there, of course, San Diego State, Josh Simmons. But if we look at the high school side of it, it's still, where are some of the big names at? Where are some of the big names leaning? And it doesn't necessarily look like maybe Florida at the moment. But you got, Fletcher Westfall, Ethan Callaway, Eddie Pierre-Louis seem to be some of the best and top options out there. What are the chances with that group, and are there any others you throw in that group?
Yeah, Michael Uni out of Texas. He's a 6'7", 290-pound, 4-star prospect. Yeah, he's out in Coppers Cove, Texas. Florida was actually by yesterday by the school, and he'll be coming in June for an official visit. Florida offered a number of months ago. There was conversations taking place several times a week, and Florida made his top 10, and it was just about where do they kind of fall in that top 10. And for them to get one of the first official visits, I believe Texas is the other school who has itinerary already booked. So to be one of the first few schools to get an OB date, that kind of shows how serious he is about Florida. So that's a name we brought up in recent months, but not as much. But now his name is starting to climb the board a little bit. Michael Uni out of Texas. I think another name, obviously, I think you already mentioned Fletcher Westfall. I think he's been to campus several times already. He told me here at the end of this month, he'll be releasing his top schools, and going from there after all his spring visits are over with, that's when he's going to set his OBs. For a long time, I've kind of said he was kind of the dark horse as far as who can land in Florida's class. I think that interest is very high, and I've always said I expect Florida to get an OB, but we'll see. I asked him if Florida's ever going to go get an OB, and he said he's still kind of determining that. So we'll see where Florida falls with him. I definitely think they're near the top of his list, but OBs can kind of get tricky. And then I know you mentioned Eddie Pierre-Louis of out of Tampa Catholic. I talked to him the other day, and he said he hasn't been speaking with Florida too much lately. He was up for Richard Garage's brother, for those who don't know, for his pro day. Had a few quick conversations with the staff, but nothing much. But he's one guy we're kind of circling and to kind of keep close tabs on him just to see where that interest on Florida's side, where that leads to. But like you said, I mean, there's a lot of options in this class, and I think the one other name that's worth mentioning is Marquise Easley out of Illinois, who was just in campus this past week, and that's another interesting recruitment. He put out a top 10, and Florida didn't make that. It was only about a month ago, and you kind of move on. And as time goes on, he told me of some schools as top 10 start acting different towards him, whatever that means. Or, a lot of these schools, recruitment's always fluid, so schools go in and out of those top groups. But he decided to give Florida a shot, and Florida's in the mix for an official visit now. You have schools like Tennessee and Georgia in the mix as well, who already have OB scheduled. But I think with Florida, they're in the middle of the pack for a lot of these kids. I think, like you said, a lot of these big names, you got to make a splash along the O-line. I feel like this cycle, Marcus Mascal out of Georgia, right now it's LSU and Florida. He's like a high 3-star type of upside. LSU was the leader, then Florida hosted them, knocked it out of the park, and now they're kind of even. But, I think those are the main names to mention right now. But as far as a pure leader, there's definitely some work to do along the O-line. There's a lot of guys in the mix for them.
Corey, are you a bit surprised by that? I mean, as much as this staff relies on their offensive line, and is it more of a strategy to, early on in Billy Napier's tenure at Florida to maybe hit the transfer portal a bit to get more developed guys? I mean, we saw 3 in the first portal cycle, and now maybe a 4th, if Josh Simmons works out, and, maybe even another in the transfer portal. Do you see it as a position where the strategy may change the longer the staff is here, and they just feel like they really, really – I mean, of course, they want the top-rated guys, so, maybe – I don't know what the issue would be there, but can they make up for it, I guess, in the transfer portal?
Yeah, I definitely think they can. I mean, you look at online, it's the one position group where you say, hey, can a guy make an impact as a freshman? It's the one position group where you don't see it too often. It's just a different game going from high school to college from a physical standpoint. So unless you're an elite guy, a lot of those O-linemen don't see the field early. And obviously with the way the portal is now, it's just a new free agency. And I think I mean, that's a smart way to go. But I mean, you have guys who have been in the college strength and conditioning program for a few years now. Then you have the guys, obviously, if you're Florida, you're going after guys who more than likely have a good amount of experience. You know what I mean? You're not going to waste that spot. You know, a lot of these high upside guys you can get get at the high school level. So I think so. I think Florida, obviously, they made some good additions this past transfer cycle. And, you know, I think that's probably, they probably feel more comfortable with that, kind of like plug and play. Get guys who can come in right away, and there's not much of a big transition for them being in the college level. But, yeah, I think as far as high school, though, one thing I will point at, though, you'll see a lot of guys like Jonathan Daniels out of Pensacola, out of Pine Forest High School. I mean, he's an elite prospect with offers from everyone across the country. But, you know, Florida just offered just over a month ago. And then that's been the case with a few kids where it's just a common question I get answered. I have to kind of answer on the message board where, you know, why did we offer this kid so late? But I know with Florida, they have a really in-depth kind of scouting system where, you know, everyone watches film. You know, if it's offensive lineman, you know, Rob Sales, Arnold Stapleton, support staff, they watch the film, and it kind of gets passed up to chain of command up to Napier, and he looks at it, and he kind of gives the green light as far as who gets offered. So everyone has their plan. You know, we'll see how it works out over the long haul. But I think that's one thing I can point to. Some of these kids have maybe had relationships with other schools for much longer.
Yeah, Corey, and another thing also is, you know, the state of Florida just does not have a whole lot of highly rated offensive linemen. So it kind of probably goes into it a little bit as well.
Yep, that definitely. And that's the thing, too. I just think overall, though, I think the portal has just changed everything, especially when it comes to that standpoint. I mean, linemen, you need guys who can kind of come in right away, especially replacing guys like how Florida is this upcoming year. I mean, go to the portal and you get a guy, you plug them in. There's not much of a headache from an adjustment standpoint. So, well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, I think that's something we're going to see more and more from Florida for years to come.
All right, Corey, let's go to another position where a lot of questions remain, and tight end. Walter Matthews seems to clearly be the top uncommitted target at the position. Caleb Odom, Amir Jackson, maybe other names to watch, but what would you say the chances are for Matthews? And of course, you know, Florida not being able to show too much at the tight end position in Billy Napier's first year, maybe more in his second year with Arlis Boardingham, maybe kind of rising up the ranks. But, you know, been dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. Maybe that has something to do with it. But Walter Matthews does seem to be the top one out there.
Yeah, and Walter Matthews, I've always said he's the most likely addition at tight end. And, you know, a big reason because I was saying that was because of his relationship with William Piegler. I mean, when Piegler departed the program, I asked him about it, and he said, he's like, that's like the coach I had the best relationship with. We're very close. But Florida, you know, he was somewhat familiar already with Russ Callaway from him just kind of being on campus a few other times he visited. So there was already some type of familiarity. Billy Napier stopped by his school back in January as well. So he's picked up the lines of communication as well to kind of help since that transition once Piegler left. I think Florida slipped a little bit with him. There's other schools that are definitely more of a threat that, you know, more than they were a few months ago. I think once Piegler departed, he kind of took a step back and kind of, you know, was kind of looking out a little bit deeper as far as what other schools are on his radar. The good thing is with Matthews is he is visiting 2 weekends from now. So that will be very key to kind of, you know, generate some more momentum with them, have some more face time. I think overall, I know, you know, Amir Jackson, he's a kid that Florida offered in January. It wasn't ranked at the time. And it was really that Florida and then the Georgia offer about a week later that really catapulted him into the national spotlight for him being a blue chipper. It's going to be interesting. He doesn't want to reveal which schools are going to get OVs or not, but I would be very shocked if Florida didn't get one from him. I think Florida and Georgia are probably positioned best at this time. So we'll see. I mean, he's from Georgia, so you're always going to kind of look at the Bulldogs a little bit more seriously with an in-state kid. But I think with tight end, that's another position. You know, Caleb Odom, that's another name that you mentioned at the top end. He didn't include Florida in his top group. I think overall, if Piegler was still here, maybe he would have, because that's another kid that had a good relationship with him. But I think tight end right now, Colton Heinrich out of Cardinal Gibbons in Fort Lauderdale is another one. There's a lot of kids, I would say, that have Florida in like that top 5, top 6 range, but there's still room to make up. I mean, Walter Matthews, like I said, is still the most likely, but I'm not as confident as I was a few months ago. So we'll see how it all plays out. I think it's one of those other positions where we'll see where the chips fall months from now. once kids take OBs, and we'll see, where that position stands at that time.
All right, we'll move to the other side of the ball right now. But before we do, Florida Victorious. College programs must be competitive in name, image, and likeness, and Florida Victorious provides those valuable NIL opportunities for Gator student athletes and future student athletes. Thanks to fans who support UF athletics, Florida Victorious is now the lead NIL entity for Gator Nation, donors, and partners. And you can become part of the team by joining today. Your support allows the Gators to be competitive in NIL, make it all that attractive for recruits. So to learn more, strengthen Gator athletics, join in helping make the Orange and Blue victorious by visiting floridavictorious.com. Link is in the description as well. So, all right, Corey, let's continue on defensive side of the ball. Of course, they have hit that side of the ball pretty hard so far, especially at the linebacker spot. But if we go up front, no commits up front for the Gators on the defensive line. And it's becoming clear that the board is starting to take a little bit of shape, though. You've been, you guys that are on three, and specifically you have been on top of the Texas A&M commit, Dalen Evans, and Florida's chances of flipping him. But also Kendall Jackson from Gainesville looks to be trending Florida. And DeAndre Robinson, LJ McCray, Jaden Jackson, Nasir Johnson all seem to be garnering heavy interest from Sean Spencer and company.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And I think that, like the ones you mentioned, those are the main guys to start with. And yeah, it's kind of interesting with Dalen Evans. I've kind of said, A&M, that's the in-state school. He can kind of visit there whenever he wants. I thought the most key thing, though, was when he visited Florida, his words were very eye-opening. I mean, he said, Florida might even be better in some spots. He had an eye-opening visit. And basically, you read what he said, it's like, man, why not flip? That's what fans were saying. That's how strong his words were. But then once you go home, you get out of that visit high and everything kind of starts to calm down. And then that's when I like to see where a school stands with the kid. So he went to A&M the following weekend, and you would think, okay, now he's going back to A&M. Now all the momentum's going to go back to the Aggies, kind of remind him why he committed there in the first place. But no, I mean, ever since even the A&M visit, he said they're basically neck and neck. And I thought that was very key. He came home, then went to A&M, and he still has those strong feelings about Florida. So, Florida is a real player for him. It's neck and neck. Official visit scheduled for June. I think that OB is going to determine everything, like where Florida falls in his recruitment. Does he make the move while he's in town? Or maybe it takes a few weeks and says, hey, I'm just sticking with A&M. But I think right now that's not the hottest name on the D-line as far as a kid that's definitely trending, kind of going up for Florida. Kendall Jackson, who, now he's getting recruited to play edge, so he's now kind of with Mike in the Mike room. I mean, I think it's just a matter of when. I know he wants to have fun with recruiting. He's going to take his visits, but Florida's very high on him. He obviously is very high on the Gators. I think if you're putting out a mock class for Florida, if you don't have Kendall Jackson in it, I think it's very surprising, just based off where everything is right now. Things could change, but. Yeah, I think, and then obviously with DeAndre Robinson out of Orlando, he's another kid that, June 2nd through the 4th, Florida is hosting so many official visitors. He'll be one of them. I think Texas might be the biggest competition for Florida. He is with Florida too. There's a school recruiting the hardest. Sean Spencer, Billy Napier, they're contacting him every day. Florida was the lifelong favorite school, so if you're the Gators, you got to feel pretty good. But I know Texas and some other schools are definitely looming, and definitely could steal the spotlight with him. And LJ McCray, he's another one where I think probably the highest ceiling out of the bunch. Very long, has that prototypical size on the edge, and I think with him right now, I think it's Florida and Florida State. Those are the schools that have the most momentum with him. And I'd probably give the slight edge to the Seminoles just because he's visited there more often. It's extremely close, though, and I think it's just about getting him back on campus, continue to host him. I'm not sure if either one of those schools are going to get OBs at this point, just because it's not that far from home. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. But even if they don't, I don't think that'll affect much at all. He's going to be on campus quite a bit, and when you see every cycle when it comes to game visits, you see the trend of certain guys who just show up randomly every Saturday. I can see him being that one just because it's not that far from home. You can kind of decide at the last moment, hey, if you're going to go or not. So I think overall Florida, you got to be feeling pretty good. I mean, they signed such a great D-line class a year ago, and then you got some guys in the portal. So overall, it's like you can't really feel kind of antsy about it just because, the proof is in the pudding with Sean Spencer and them. I think before it's all, I mean, they're going to get guys in the class sooner or later, and I think it's a great, impressive group to choose from because they're trending up for a lot of guys.
Absolutely. And in one group, they've already hit pretty hard, Corey, and got some elite talent. Linebacker, Miles Graham, Darius Hayes already there. So probably not many more to come into this class, but Chris Jones seems to be the other linebacker talked about the most right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think right now, I mean, he's trending in the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. I think with Florida, they've already received almost a handful of visits. They have an OB scheduled for June. And I asked him after he put out his top group, and I said to him, I'm not saying leaders, but who do you have the best relationship right now? And he said probably Florida. And that was very key. He said Georgia probably second. So Jay Bateman, he deserves a lot of credit in this recruitment. He's a Virginia native, so they kind of connect on, kind of stuff back home, kind of that home-like feel when they speak. There's a lot of things they both are aware of back home, and a lot of places they've been, same places they've been to. So it's like that home-like feel with him. Jamar Chaney previously was a big part of his recruitment, but Billy Napier has since stepped up, and I think overall in Austin Armstrong too. So I know Chris Jones, he's receiving the red carpet treatment, as they say, from Florida. I know the interesting thing with him is he's visited like 6 or 7 schools 3 times or more. So you think like, man, this kid's been to Florida so much. I mean, that's huge. It is huge, but there's a lot of other schools he's visited just as much. So this is a pretty crowded recruitment. Obviously, we mentioned Georgia already. You got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State's in those worlds. So a lot of competition for him, but Florida is definitely the hot team with him. Him saying that that's the school he's the best relationship with, I think that's a major key. And I think the last guy, as far as serious targets to touch on, is Aaron Childs, who's up in the Maryland. He'll be so Florida's stopping by his school. Jay Bateman will be at the school today. Longtime target in the on 300 who, he visited last summer, got the offer several months prior to that. And now is returning to Gainesville here in June as well. So I think Michigan's probably the school trending in his recruitment right now, but I would say Florida's probably top 4 range for him. When he takes his OV, that'll be his second visit to Florida. So I think either way, you look at Florida's class, you have two Under Armour Americans in the class. It's arguably the best linebacker class in the country early on, but adding a guy like Jones or Childs just takes it to that next level. So I think when you look at that position group, there's not much stress, just kind of hold on to the guys you have. And if you get anyone else in the class, it's like the cherry on top. So, Jay Bateman, he's doing a great job in this class. Definitely deserves a lot of credit.
Absolutely, Corey. A year ago, he was kind of getting hammered for that last class, but it didn't take long for this 2024 class to come about, and he kind of changed that reputation on the recruiting trail.
Just how things change, man, when it comes to college football. One day you should be fired, and the next day, I mean, hey, where's the contract extension? So if you're a coach, just don't go on social media. That's all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, but patience sometimes pays off. We just have to wait a little bit. So, the staff has adjusted pretty well for this 2024 class, and where they have adjusted pretty well, and already too. In the defensive backfield, you got 2 safeties already committed: Xavier Filsaime, Josiah Davis. But a lot of questions still remain for cornerbacks, and we know the change that's going on now with Corey Raymond taking over the secondary room, and then the big storyline, of course, just a few days ago, Juwan Johnson decommitting from Colorado. Already has a trip to Gainesville lined up. Florida, LSU were among his finalists when he committed to Colorado. But now also other guys getting into the mix for a Jalen Crawford. Jordan Pride thought to be on commit watch after decommitting from FSU. Jamari Howard, another maybe flip target there for Michigan State. We kind of been on flip watch for a bit. Is that still the case with him? I mean, there's plenty of names to continue with. Justin Denson, Xavier Mincy. It does seem like, safety, good start there, but still can maybe fill out this class a bit more with another safety or two, and then also the cornerback group led by Corey Raymond.
Yeah, and a lot of these kids too, like you mentioned, so many options. It's almost like you can group this corners and safeties together because they're recruiting a lot of versatile kids who are just, I mean, you look at his name, Mincy. I mean, his coach does it too. It's like they swear he's a corner. Like, hey, well, he's going to be a corner in college, and I think he's a guy who's versatile enough. He can kind of bounce around the secondary. He's one guy that I'm very confident in with Florida. I don't think he announces anytime real soon, but I think if today was decision day, I think Florida would be the choice for him. 6'3", 190 pounds out of Daytona Beach, Maryland. So, as we mentioned, LJ McCray before, that's his teammate. So getting those two guys on the mainland would be huge for Florida. Kevin Levy, that's another kid down in the Palm Beach area. He was offered in January, has a good relationship with Corey Raymond. And, I know people don't like the whole, childhood favorite school curse, but I was going to mention it. But Florida was his favorite school growing up. So I know when he got it in January, he was pretty taken aback by it, was like almost speechless when he got it. And he's maintained a strong relationship with Coach Raymond, and he should be on campus here pretty soon. His last few visits fell through with he had to cancel at the last second, but I think he's one of the more realistic additions. He'd be a pure corner if he did go to Florida. So I think overall, I mean, Charles Lester, I mean, that one's basically finished. I mean, he's not going to come to Florida unless there's some huge surprise that happens down the road. Mm-hmm. Kobe Black, who's a 5-star corner out of Texas, he's worth mentioning just to the fact where Florida is dropped by his school, consecutive days. I haven't seen that from Florida since Napier was here. So on Monday, it was Austin Armstrong, and yesterday it was Mike Pearson. So he's another Texas kid out of Waco, Texas, and 5-star, I think number 3 cornerback in the country with on 3. Definitely some room to make up there, but the fact that, Florida stopped by twice in back-to-back days, I mean, that shows how serious they are about that kid. So he's a guy to kind of list his name. We'll see where it goes. Jordan Pride, I still like where Florida stands with him. I think some people are surprised he hasn't committed yet. I mean, he just decommitted. I think whenever he takes his next visit to Florida, whether it's unofficial or an official, I think that's when you kind of have to label him as a possible commitment watch. It's more of a timing thing with him. So I think you still have to feel good if you're Florida there. Jamari Howard, it's like most South Florida kids. They don't say, they're kind of well reserved when discussing their recruitment. Yeah, I mean, they don't reveal a whole lot. But I think it's funny because I've always said I think he stays in the Southeast, most likely in the state of Florida, FSU or Florida. But he does say all the right things about the Spartans. Yeah, I mean, he does have a great relationship with them, believes in their development up there in East Lansing. So I wouldn't say it's guaranteed that he's going to reopen his recruitment. I mean, in-state schools, like we mentioned, the Seminoles and Gators are making a strong case to flip him. But I think right now it's just kind of a 50-50 with him. He could all of a sudden decommit any day, or I can see him signing with MSU later this year. So I think he's another name. We're talking about hot names on the board. He's one of them. Just the fact that he's visited, several times this spring, and he's a priority right now for Raymond. And another one we'll touch on too real quick is Wardell Mack out of Louisiana. Still like LSU there. LSU is probably, it's not often when top kids leave Louisiana and don't pick LSU. So they've been the hot team with him trending up. But he did visit here recently, and he has OB set for June. So never say never. So I think with Florida, you already have Xavier in the class. You have Josiah Davis. It's already a strong safety class. Now it's just about getting some of these other guys in class, like Kevin Levy, who I think is definitely probably most likely out of that group, and some of these other guys too. But I think in June we're going to figure out where the DB class stands.
Corey, I hope I'm not making too much of this, but man, I know huddle highlights are meant to really showcase a player, but man, I tell you what, I fell in love with the film of Xavier Fields to me. Am I making too much out of that kid? I know he made the move to safety. It seemed like he fit in right away. 5-star status, and I thought early on maybe going to Georgia, but Florida ends up getting him right now. I'm a big fan of that kid in Florida's most recent commit.
Yeah, I think he's very instinctive. His football awareness is very impressive. He's a kid that, no matter where he is on the field, the ball's halfback tossed into the field, he wants to be involved in that stat sheet every play. He wants to be in the play. And I just love the way he gets downhill. He comes down and he's looking to make a statement. And you can tell he's fairly new playing the position. There's times he can kind of play with a little bit better control and stuff like that. But that's all stuff that comes over time. It's very teachable. But I love his aggressiveness, the way he comes downhill. The way he's just looking to make an impact hit. try to open up a play for the defense. And, overall also, too, good size, good kid, too. So he kind of has those leadership qualities off the field. I just think overall, I mean, this is a kid, like you said, Dave, you watch this film now and you love it, but I think it's going to get even better and better over time. So I think he's a kid that's a big-time player, but he still has a little bit of a ceiling to him considering he just moved to safety.
Absolutely, absolutely. Corey, last thing right quick. Of course, we featured very, very heavy high school recruiting here. Transfer portal coming up as the window closing very, very soon. And look, Florida's kind of been quiet by design behind the scenes as far as the transfer portal and activity goes. How do you see it playing out for Florida? The only really kind of big name out there, as I mentioned, is Simmons, the San Diego State offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think honestly it won't be as active as it was before. I know obviously when they signed the last group of portal kids, it was just that first window open, and that's when it's almost like kind of like the signing days. It's the first signing day you get all the action. The second one you get some guys, some late additions that may transfer out after spring football. And like you said, the San Diego State offensive lineman, he's really been the only name somewhat mentioned. I heard some buzz too. I think it's a safety out of Michigan. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. Possibly looking at Florida too. I've been so filled with all the high school stuff with Nick kind of attacking the portal, so I haven't been as caught up with it as of late. But I don't think it's going to be as active as it was before. I think you saw the bulk of kids Florida brought in, and obviously Florida's still evaluating, especially after spring football. That's where you get to kind of see, okay, what are we missing? What can we make an improvement on? Who can step in? And I think obviously this is a time where Florida's going to be a little bit more picky with who they want to bring in, especially with the amount of spots available. So I think overall, I think you're going to see some guys join the program, some guys coming on a visit. But I think overall, I think you saw most of the action in previous months. And, yeah, we'll just see how it rolls out, man. It's a crazy time for college football recruiting, man. This portal has changed the game. That and NIL have completely changed the game in a matter of a few years.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, R.J. Moten is that Michigan safety that you're talking. You're talking.
Moten,
Yep. So, yeah, definitely probably one to keep an eye on as well. So, all right, Corey, man, that will do it, man. Thank you so much. And what you guys got going on there at Gators Online on 3?
Yeah, so Keith Niebuhr, he just recently came on to help out. He does mostly recruiting, but helps out team stuff. So I think between us two, Zach and Nick, Dom and Pat, we have a pretty jam-packed team right now. It's, Florida's trending up recruiting-wise, so recruiting is always taking place on the site. We always have articles up. We're doing a lot of analytical stuff as well. So head over to Gators Online. We're always running promotions, and as always, we'd love to have as many people as we can. So we appreciate everyone tuning in.
Yeah, Keith, a great pickup there. A lot of inside info already in just his short time on the staff there. So really good pickup there for Gators Online. You guys got a good commitment there not long ago with Keith.
Yeah, they are, man. A lot of people, I don't think a lot of people knew. Like a lot of the diehard Florida fans know, but
yeah,
Keith graduated from Florida too, so he's just an encyclopedia when it comes to Gators athletics. So definitely, if you're on the message boards of Gators Online, definitely interact with him. He's definitely has a lot of knowledge when it comes to all Florida.
Sounds good. All right, Corey Bender from Gators Online on 3 right here on Gators Breakdown. That'll do it for this episode. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.